The great ships came from every corner of the galaxy. They flew through clouds of purple gas and past dying stars. They carried kings and queens, generals and ambassadors. They brought creatures of every shape and size to the Ithorian palace, where the Century Summit would decide the fate of 1,000 worlds. The Ithorian Empire had hosted this gathering for 10,000 years. Their palace floated above a planet of golden clouds, held in place by technology so old that no one remembered how it worked. 3 suns burned in the sky, painting everything in shades of orange and pink. The halls were made of living crystal that sang soft music when the wind blew through them. Princess Seraphine stood on her private balcony and watched the ships arrive. Her wings, thin as glass and bright as rainbows, caught the light of the 3 suns. She was young by her people's standards, only 400 years old, but she had seen many summits. She had watched emperors bow and generals weep. She had seen alliances made and broken with a single word. Today she watched with special interest. Today, the humans were coming. Humanity was the youngest species in the galactic concord. They had discovered faster than light travel only 3 centuries ago. In a galaxy where some civilizations had existed for millions of years, humans were like children who had just learned to walk. The other species found them curious at best and amusing at worst. The Velthri arrived first. They were insect-like creatures with hard shells and clicking mandibles. Their ships were black and angular, built for war. Ambassador Crix led their delegation, his many eyes scanning everything with cold calculation. The Chronosians came next. They were giants, 12 feet tall, with gray skin like stone. Their voices were so deep that smaller creatures felt the vibrations in their bones. General Thorn commanded their group. His massive arms crossed over his chest as he walked through the crystal halls. One by one, the 12 great species of the galaxy arrived. The snake-like Soroti slithered in with their golden scales gleaming. The Mindari floated above the ground, their bodies made of pure energy. The Thornback Collective marched in perfect unison, their hive mind controlling hundreds of bodies as one. Each delegation brought hundreds of attendants. Each species announced their arrival with great ceremony. Holographic displays showed their greatest achievements. Musicians played songs that bent reality itself. Psychic projections filled the minds of watchers with visions of power and glory. Then the human ship arrived. Princess Seraphine leaned forward on her balcony. The vessel was small, barely larger than a personal shuttle. It had no decorations, no flowing banners, no escort of warships. It simply landed in the docking bay like a delivery vehicle, dropping off a package. One man walked out. He wore a gray uniform with no medals, no jewels. No symbols of rank, except for a small patch on his shoulder that showed the blue and green of Earth. His hair was dark with streaks of gray at the temples. His face was lined with age, but his eyes were sharp and clear. He carried nothing except a small bag over his shoulder. Commander Elias Vance looked around the docking bay, nodded once to himself, and began walking toward the palace. The whispers started immediately. Is that all they sent? Clicked Ambassador Crix to his aid. One human? No guards? No advisors? Perhaps they could not afford more. The aide replied with amusement in his voice. General Thorn laughed, and the sound rolled through the hall like thunder. The humans send a single old man to represent their entire species. This is what happens when you let children sit at the adult table. The other delegations joined in the mockery. The Ceratai hissed with laughter. The Mindry pulsed with bright colors that signaled amusement. Even the serious Thornback Collective allowed themselves a moment of shared humor. Elias Dance walked through it all without changing his expression. He did not speed up or slow down. He did not look at the laughing aliens or respond to their jokes. He simply walked, his footsteps steady on the crystal floor. Princess Seraphine found herself fascinated. She had seen proud warriors enter this hall with their heads held high. She had seen cunning politicians with false smiles and hidden daggers. She had never seen someone walk through open mockery with such complete calm. The formal welcome ceremony began in the grand hall. Each species was announced with full titles and honors. The Velthari delegation took nearly an hour to introduce. with each of their 12 sub-ambassadors requiring separate recognition. The Chronosians demanded that their military victories be listed in full, a recitation that lasted even longer. When it came time for each species to introduce themselves to the assembly, the displays grew even more elaborate. The Serati projected a vision of their homeworld, a planet of endless oceans and floating cities. The Mindari showed the birth of their first consciousness, a moment of pure light that made several observers weep. The Thornback Collective demonstrated their unity by having all 300 of their bodies speak a single word at exactly the same time. Then the announcer called for humanity's introduction. Elias Vance stood. He walked to the center of the chamber. Every eye, every sensor, every mind in the room was focused on him. He bowed his head once. Then he returned to his seat. The silence lasted 3 full seconds. Then Princess Seraphine laughed. The sound was like crystal bells ringing in a winter wind. It was not a cruel laugh. Not exactly. It was the laugh of someone who had expected very little and received even less. "Does the human speak at all?" she called out, her voice carrying through the hall. "Or has your species sent us a mute to represent them?" More laughter followed. The Velthari clicked their mandibles. The Chronosians rumbled with amusement. Even species who usually maintained dignity allowed themselves to smile. Elias Vance looked up at the princess on her elevated platform. Their eyes met across the vast hall. His expression did not change. He did not seem angry or embarrassed or defensive. He simply looked at her with those sharp, clear eyes. And in that moment, Seraphine felt something she could not name. It was like standing at the edge of a deep pool of water that looked calm on the surface, but hid unknown depths. Below, the human said nothing. He turned his gaze away from her and settled back in his seat as the next species began their introduction. The moment passed. The summit continued. The mockery became a running joke among the delegations. But Princess Seraphine found herself glancing at the human throughout the rest of the ceremony. He sat perfectly still, watching everything with those quiet eyes. He did not speak to anyone. He did not react to the ongoing jokes at his expense. He simply observed, that night, as the 3 suns set behind the golden clouds. Seraphine stood on her balcony and thought about the strange human. She had laughed at him in front of the entire galaxy. He had not even blinked. She did not know why that bothered her. She did not know why she could not stop thinking about the look in his eyes. She told herself it did not matter. He was just a human, a representative of a young and unimportant species. He would sit quietly through the summit, contribute nothing, and return to his little world at the edge of the galaxy. She was wrong, of course, but she would not understand how wrong until the moment the hall trembled. The days that followed were filled with arguments and negotiations. The 12 species of the Galactic Concord had gathered to discuss trade routes, territorial borders, and resource sharing. These were serious matters that affected billions of lives across thousands of worlds. Wars had been fought over less. Commander Elias Vance attended every session. He sat in the seat assigned to humanity, a small chair in the back corner of the chamber. He arrived early and left late. He watched every speaker with careful attention, and he never said a single word. The joke about the silent human spread through the palace like fire through dry grass. Servants whispered about it in the hallways. Diplomats mentioned it during private meetings. Even the Ithorian emperor, ancient and wise as he was, allowed himself a small smile when the topic came up. Ambassador Crix of the Velthari found the human particularly amusing. During a formal dinner on the 3rd night, he raised his voice loud enough for the entire hall to hear. "I have solved the mystery of the human," he announced. "They communicate through smell, like the primitive insects of my homeworld. That is why he does not speak. He is simply waiting for us to develop the proper noses." The hall erupted in laughter. General Thorne slapped the table so hard that plates jumped into the air. The Serati delegates hissed with amusement, their forked tongues flickering. Elias continued eating his meal. He did not look up. He did not acknowledge the joke. He cut his food into small pieces and chewed slowly. as if he were the only person in the room. Princess Seraphine watched him from the royal table. She had expected some reaction. A flash of anger in his eyes, a tightening of his jaw, the smallest sign that the constant mockery affected him. But there was nothing. The human was as calm as a stone at the bottom of a river. Perhaps General Thorne added, his deep voice carrying through the hall. The humans have realized they have nothing worth contributing. They sit at our table and eat our food, but they bring nothing of value. They are like children who have wandered into a meeting of adults. More laughter, more jokes. The entertainment continued throughout the dinner. That night, Seraphine could not sleep. She walked through the empty hallways of the palace. Her wings folded against her back. The crystal walls hummed softly in the darkness. The 3 moons of the Ithorian system cast silver light through the windows. She found herself on the eastern balcony, the one that overlooked the nebula gardens. The gardens were a wonder of the galaxy, filled with plants that had been collected from 1,000 worlds. Flowers that glowed in the dark, trees that sang when the wind touched them, pools of water that reflected not the sky above, but the memories of those who looked into them. She was not alone. Ilias Vance stood at the far end of the balcony, his hands resting on the railing. He was looking up at the stars, his face calm and thoughtful. Seraphine hesitated. She could leave. She could pretend she had not seen him. But curiosity pulled her forward. "You do not sleep?" she asked. He glanced at her, then returned his gaze to the stars. "I sleep when I need to, Your Highness." His voice surprised her. It was quiet but clear, with a depth that did not match his ordinary appearance. This was the first time she had heard him speak more than a single word. "Why do you not defend yourself?" The question came out before she could stop it. Defend myself against what? The mockery, the insults. Your people are laughed at by every species in this palace. Does that not bother you? Elias was silent for a long moment. The nebula gardens glowed below them, purple and blue and green. A night bird from some distant world sang a melody that sounded like crying. "Your Highness," he said finally, "when I was a young man, I served on a ship that was attacked by raiders. We were outnumbered and outgunned. Our captain was killed. Our weapons were damaged. Most of my crew believed we were going to die." He paused, his eyes still fixed on the stars. "I survived because I stayed calm. I watched. I waited. And when the moment came, I acted." Turned to look at her. The loudest voice in the room is rarely the most important one. Seraphine did not know how to respond. This was not what she had expected from the silent human. "But surely," she said, "you must feel something. Pride, anger. These species have ruled the galaxy for millions of years. Your people are newcomers. Do you not wish to prove yourselves?" "Prove ourselves to whom?" He smiled, and the expression changed his entire face. It made him look younger somehow, more alive. "Your Highness, humanity has existed for 300,000 years. We have survived ice ages and plagues. We have fought wars against ourselves that killed millions. We have stood on the edge of extinction more than once." He turned back to the stars. "We reached space not because we were the strongest or the smartest. We reached it because we refused to give up. We kept going when everything told us to stop. We learned from our mistakes. We adapted. We survived. What does that have to do with staying silent while others mock you?" "Everything." He straightened his uniform, a simple, absent gesture. "The species in that hall have power. They have technology. They have empires that span thousands of worlds. But they have forgotten something important." "What?" "How to listen." He bowed to her, a formal gesture that somehow felt sincere rather than mocking. "Good night, Your Highness. The summit continues tomorrow. I would not want to miss anything." He walked away, his footsteps quiet on the crystal floor. Seraphine watched him go, her mind full of questions she did not know how to ask. In the days that followed, she found herself watching the human more carefully. She noticed things that others missed. When Ambassador Crix proposed a trade embargo against the outer colonies, something flickered in the human's eyes. When General Thorn boasted about his new weapons array, Elias's fingers tapped once against his chair. He was listening, she realized, not just hearing the words, but understanding what lay beneath them. He was watching the body language of every speaker, tracking the alliances and rivalries that shifted with each session. The other species saw a silent fool. They saw a representative of a young species who had nothing to offer. They saw exactly what they expected to see, but Seraphine was beginning to suspect that they were seeing exactly what Elias wanted them to see. The question was, why? What was the human waiting for? What was he planning? She did not know, but she intended to find out. On the fourth night, she invited him to walk through the Nebula Gardens. He accepted with a simple nod. They walked in silence for a long time, surrounded by the wonders of 1,000 worlds. "You are not what you appear to be," she said finally. "No one is, Your Highness. What are you really?" He stopped beside a pool that reflected not stars but swirling galaxies. His reflection looked back at him from impossible depths. "I am exactly what humanity needs me to be." Before she could ask what he meant, an alarm shattered the peace of the gardens. Emergency lights flashed red. Voices shouted in a dozen languages. Something had gone wrong at the summit, something that would change everything. The grand hall was in chaos. "Princess." Seraphine pushed through crowds of panicking servants and confused guards. The emergency lights painted everything in shades of angry red. Voices shouted over each other in languages from every corner of the galaxy. By the time she reached the main chamber, a full diplomatic crisis was already underway. Ambassador Crix stood in the center of the floor, his mandibles clicking so fast they sounded like a machine gun. His shell had turned dark purple with rage, a color she had never seen on a Velthari before. He screamed, pointing one sharp claw at the Chronosian delegation. "You have violated every treaty, every agreement, every promise made between our peoples." General Thorn rose to his full height, 12 feet of gray muscle and barely contained fury. "You dare accuse the Chronosian Dominion? You whose spies infest every system in the galaxy? We have proof." Crix activated a holographic display that filled the center of the room. Images appeared in the air, showing massive mining operations on 3 small moons. "Your people are extracting resources from the sacred moons of Velareth. These moons have been declared neutral territory for 6,000 years. This is an act of war." The chamber exploded with voices. The Serati delegation slithered closer, their golden scales catching the red emergency lights. The Mindari pulsed with colors that signaled alarm and confusion. The Thornback Collective moved as one, hundreds of bodies positioning themselves near the exits. Seraphine found her father, Emperor Ethon, trying to restore order from his throne. His voice, usually commanding, was lost in the noise. His ancient face showed something she had rarely seen: fear. "Please," the Emperor called out. "Let us discuss this calmly. There must be an explanation. The explanation is clear," Crix shouted. "The Chronosians have been planning this for years. They mean to control the Valorium deposits on those moons. They mean to build weapons that will give them power over all of us." Lies. Thorn slammed his fist against the table, cracking the crystal surface. "The Chronosian Dominion does not answer to insect accusations." "Then you admit it. You do not deny the mining operations." "I deny nothing and admit nothing to you, crawler." The insult hung in the air like poison. The Velthari delegation went completely still. In their culture, being called a crawler was the worst possible offense. It was the kind of word that started wars. Ambassador Crix's voice dropped to a deadly whisper that somehow carried through the entire hall. "If you will not withdraw from the sacred moons, the Velthari swarm will remove you ourselves. By force. Then come," Thorn growled. "The Dominion will show you why we have never lost a war." Other species began to take sides. The Serati announced their support for the Chronosians, citing old alliances. The Mindari declared neutrality, but began evacuating their delegation. The Thornback Collective simply watched, their hive mind calculating possibilities that no individual could comprehend. Seraphine watched her father's authority crumble in real time. The summit her family had hosted for 10,000 years was collapsing. The peace they had maintained across the galaxy was shattering like glass. She looked for the human, Elias. Vance sat in his small chair at the back of the room. He had not moved. He had not spoken. He watched the chaos unfold with those quiet, careful eyes. "This is madness," Seraphine whispered, but no one was listening to whispers. The shouting grew louder. Holographic displays flickered with military projections. Ships in orbit began powering up their weapons. The galaxy was sliding toward a war that would kill billions. Ambassador Crix raised his claw, a signal to his delegation. "We leave this summit. There is nothing more to discuss. The next time we meet the Chronosians, it will be on the battlefield." "I'll run back to your hive," Thorn spat. "We will find you soon enough." "Stop." Emperor Ethon stood, his wings spreading wide. He was ancient, over 12,000 years old, and his voice carried the weight of all those centuries. "I will not allow this. The Ithorian Empire has maintained peace for peace." Crix turned on him, fury blazing in his many eyes. "You speak of peace while the Chronosians prepare for war under your very nose. Either you knew about this and said nothing, or you are blind. Which is it, Emperor?" The silence that followed was terrible. Seraphine saw her father's face go pale. The accusation had struck deep. "The Ithorian Empire has always acted in good faith," the Emperor said, but his voice had lost its strength. "Has it?" A new voice entered the conversation. The Serati ambassador slithered forward, her scales catching the light like liquid. "Gold. We have heard rumors, Emperor. Rumors that the Ithorians knew about the mining operations months ago. Rumors that you have been playing both sides against each other for your own benefit." More accusations flew. More secrets were revealed. It seemed that everyone had been spying on everyone else. Every species had violated some agreement or broken some promise. The web of lies and betrayals was so complex that no one could see where it started or where it ended. Seraphine felt tears burning in her eyes. Everything her family had built was being destroyed. Everything she had believed about the galaxy was being exposed as illusion. She looked again at Elias Vance. He was still watching, still silent, but something had changed in his expression. There was a tension in his shoulders that had not been there before. His eyes moved from speaker to speaker, tracking not just their words but their positions in the room. He was waiting for something, she realized. But what? General Thorn raised his massive fist. "Enough words. The time for talking is over. The Chronosian Dominion withdraws from this summit and from the Galactic Concord itself. Let all species know that we stand alone and we stand strong." "Then you stand as enemies of the Velthari swarm," Crix replied, "and enemies of every species that honors the old treaties." "Oh, so be it." The two delegations began moving toward the exits. Other species hurried to get out of their way. The Emperor called out, begging them to reconsider. But his words were lost in the noise of movement and anger. This was it, Seraphine thought. The moment when everything fell apart. The moment when peace died and war began. She had seen it coming and could do nothing to stop it. Then she saw Elias Vance stand up. The movement was small and quiet. No one else noticed. They were too busy watching the great powers storm out of the chamber. They were too focused on the drama at the center of the room. But Seraphine watched the human rise from his chair. She watched him straighten his simple gray uniform. She watched him take a single step forward, and she felt something change in the air. It was like the moment before a storm, when the wind dies and the birds go silent, and the whole world holds its breath. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff and feeling the first pebbles start to fall. Elias Vance began to walk toward the center of the chamber. His footsteps were quiet on the crystal floor. His face was calm. His eyes were clear, and Princess Seraphine understood, in that moment, that everything she had believed about the silent human was wrong. He had not been weak. He had not been unprepared. He had not been a fool sent by a foolish species. He had been waiting, and now, finally, his moment had come. Elias Vance walked through the chaos like a man walking through a dream. Delegates rushed past him. Guards shouted orders. Holographic displays flickered with images of warships and battle plans. The greatest powers in the galaxy were preparing for a conflict that would tear apart 1,000 worlds, and one human walked calmly. To the center of it all, he reached the speaking platform just as Ambassador Crix and General Thorn were about to exit through opposite doors. He did not climb the steps or activate any displays. He simply stood there, a small figure in gray surrounded by giants. Then he spoke. Enough. It was a single word, spoken quietly, almost conversationally. It should have been lost in the noise of the collapsing summit, but something in that word cut through everything else. It was like a blade made of ice, slicing through the hot anger that filled the room. It was like a stone dropped into a still pond, sending ripples in every direction. The room fell silent. Ambassador Crix stopped mid-step. His mandibles, which had been clicking furiously, went still. General Thorn froze with his hand on the door, his massive body suddenly motionless. Every eye in the chamber turned to look at the human. The representative from Earth wishes to speak. Emperor Ethon's voice was uncertain, confused. Elias did not look at the Emperor. He looked at Ambassador Crix. "Your surveillance network in the neutral corridor," he said. "The one you used to discover the Chronosian mining operation. It violates Article 7 of the Concord Charter. Specifically, the prohibition against monitoring sovereign space without authorization." Crix's shell flickered through several colors. "How do you know about— You have 17 listening posts hidden in the asteroid fields of the Velarath system," Elias continued. "They have been there for approximately 300 years. Would you like me to provide their exact coordinates?" The chamber was completely silent now. Not the angry silence of before, but the shocked silence of witnesses watching something impossible. Elias turned to General Thorn. "The moons you are mining contain Valorium deposits. Valorium is only useful for one purpose: the construction of phase shift engines. Your government publicly abandoned that technology 40 years ago after the Treaty of Burning Stars. You announced that the research was too dangerous to continue." Thorn's gray face went pale. "That information is classified at the highest level." "It is," Elias nodded. "Just as it is classified that you have been building a new fleet in the dark space region beyond the galactic rim. A fleet equipped with exactly the kind of engines that require Valorium to function. A fleet that does not appear on any official record." The silence deepened. The Chronosian delegation exchanged terrified glances. This human, this representative of a species they had mocked for days, knew secrets that could destroy empires. But Elias was not finished. He turned to face the Ithorian throne. "Emperor Ethon, your intelligence service discovered both the Velthari surveillance network and the Chronosian mining operation 6 months ago. You said nothing because a war between these two species would create opportunities. It would open trade routes that the Ithorian Empire has wanted for centuries. It would weaken your two greatest rivals while you remained neutral and strong." Emperor Ethon sat frozen on his throne. Princess Seraphine felt her heart stop. The accusation was aimed at her family, at everything she had believed about her people's honor. "You are lying," the Emperor whispered. "I am not." Elias reached into his pocket and pulled out a small data chip. "This contains evidence of 147 treaty violations. It's committed by delegations present in this room over the past decade. Trade manipulation, territorial encroachment, illegal weapons development, secret alliances formed and broken." He set the chip gently on the speaking platform. "Every species here has broken the rules they claim to uphold. Every delegation has secrets they believe are hidden. Every empire has committed acts they would rather forget." He paused, letting his words sink in. War between the Velthari and the Chronosians would not end with those two species. The evidence on this chip would drag everyone into the conflict. Every secret alliance would be exposed. Every hidden crime would come to light. The war you are rushing toward would not kill billions. It would kill trillions. It would burn across the entire galaxy until nothing was left but ash and silence. Ambassador Crix found his voice. "You have been spying on all of us." "Listening," Elias corrected. "There is a difference. You dismissed us because we were quiet, You mocked us because we did not announce our achievements with holographic displays and psychic projections. You assumed that silence meant weakness. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every delegate, one by one. Where I come from, we have a saying, still waters run deep. Humanity did not reach the stars by being the loudest or the strongest. We reached them by being patient, by watching, by learning. General Thorne stepped forward, his massive form casting a shadow over the human. You threaten the Chronosian Dominion? You think this data chip will protect you when our fleets burn your homeworld? Elias did not step back. He did not show any fear. General, the data on this chip has already been distributed. If anything happens to Earth, if anything happens to me, it will be released to every news network. Every government, every citizen in the galaxy. Every species will know exactly what their leaders have been doing behind closed doors. He smiled, and for the first time, Seraphine saw something dangerous in that expression. Humanity does not want war. We do not want dominion. We have seen what war does. We have lived through conflicts that nearly destroyed our entire species. We know the price of violence better than any people in this galaxy. He picked up the data chip and held it up to the light. What we want is very simple. We want a seat at the table, a real one. We want to be treated as equals, not as children or pets or amusements. We want our voice to be heard. The silence stretched on. No one moved. No one spoke. Finally, Ambassador Crix's mandibles clicked softly. And if we refuse, if we decide to take our chances, then everything burns. Elias shrugged. But we both know you will not refuse. None of you will. Because every species in this room has worked too hard and sacrificed too much to watch their empires crumble. Every leader here has secrets they need to protect. He looked at the Emperor. You can hate us for this. You can resent us. You can spend the next 1,000 years plotting revenge. That is your choice. But today, right now, you will sit back down. You will continue this summit. And you will include humanity in every decision that affects the future of this galaxy. The chip glittered in his hand, small and fragile and containing enough truth to destroy worlds. So, Elias said quietly, shall we begin? For a long moment, no one moved. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, held by a single human in a gray uniform. Then Emperor Ethon did something he had not done in 1,000 years of rule. He rose from his throne, descended the crystal steps, and extended his hand to the human ambassador. Perhaps, the ancient emperor said softly, we have underestimated your people. Elias shook his hand. Most do. We have learned not to mind. One by one, the other delegations returned to their seats. Ambassador Crix, General Thorne, the Serati, the Mindari, the Thornback Collective, all of them, taking their places at the table where humanity now had a voice. Princess Seraphine watched from her position near the throne. Her eyes were wet with tears she did not fully understand. The human had humiliated her family. He had exposed their secrets and used their shame as leverage, but he had also saved them. He had stopped a war that would have killed trillions. He had done it without firing a single shot. And somewhere deep inside her heart, in a place she did not want to examine too closely, she felt something that might have been admiration. The summit continued, and nothing would ever be the same. The summit continued for 3 more days after that. Moment in the Grand Hall, everything had changed. The jokes about the silent humans stopped completely. When Elias Vance spoke during sessions, which he did rarely and briefly, every delegate listened with careful attention. When he asked questions, the answers came quickly and honestly. When he made suggestions, they were considered seriously. The other species watched him with a mixture of fear and respect. They had thought they understood humans. They had been wrong. Princess Seraphine watched all of this from her usual position near her father's throne. The Emperor had aged in those 3 days. The exposure of his manipulation had damaged him deeply, not just politically but personally. He had believed himself to be a wise leader, playing a clever game. He had learned that he was just another player on a board, controlled by others. The summit reached conclusions that would have seemed impossible a week before. The Velthari agreed to dismantle their surveillance network in the neutral corridor. The Chronosians agreed to stop their mining operations and open their dark space fleet to inspection. The Ithorian Empire agreed to new transparency measures that would prevent future manipulation, and humanity was granted full membership in the Galactic Concord, the permanent seat on the High Council. 300 years of being dismissed as children were over in a single afternoon. On the final night of the summit, Princess Seraphine found Elias on the eastern balcony again. The nebula gardens glowed below them in colors that had no names. The 3 moons of the Ethorian system hung in the sky like pearls on black velvet. "You knew," she said, without greeting. "From the moment you arrived, you knew exactly what you were going to do." Elias nodded. "Yes, the silence. The patience, letting everyone mock you. It was all part of your plan. Not a plan exactly." He leaned against the railing, looking out at the stars. "More like a strategy. An approach that my people have used for a very long time." "What approach?" "Waiting, watching, understanding the game before you make your move." He turned to face her. "Your people have ruled this region of space for 10,000 years. The Velthari have had faster-than-light travel for almost 1,000,000. The Chronosians have conquered more worlds than I can count. Humanity has been part of the galactic community for 3 centuries. Psst, we knew this. That is why we did not take you seriously." "Exactly," Elias smiled. "And that is why it worked. You could not imagine that a young species might have something to offer. You could not believe that the quiet man in the gray uniform was anything other than what he appeared to be." Seraphine felt a flash of anger. "You manipulated us. All of us. You used our pride against us." "Yes," he admitted. "Just as your father tried to use the Velthari and Chronosians against each other. Just as Ambassador Crix used his spy network to gather leverage. Just as General Thorn used his secret fleet to prepare for a war he planned to start on his own terms." The anger faded as quickly as it had come. He was right. Everyone at the summit had been playing games. The human had simply played better. "How?" she asked. "How did you gather all that information? Humanity does not have the resources to spy on every major species in the galaxy." "We did not spy. We listened." Elias clasped his hands behind his back. "Your species communicate in ways you do not even realize. Your technology leaks information constantly. Your delegates gossip. Your servants talk. Your computer systems have weaknesses that you have never bothered to fix because you never imagined anyone would exploit them." He paused, considering his next words. "Humans are good at listening. We are good at watching. We grew up on a dangerous planet, surrounded by predators larger and stronger than we were. We survived not because we were the biggest or the fastest, but because we paid attention. We learned to read the signs that told us when a storm was coming. We learned to understand the behavior of animals that wanted to eat us." He looked up at the 3 moons. "The galaxy is not so different. There are predators here too. Powers that would consume us without a second thought if we gave them the chance. We needed to understand them before they understood us." Seraphine was quiet for a long time. The night wind rustled through the gardens below, carrying the scent of flowers from 100 worlds. "Laughed at you," she said finally. "In front of everyone? I mocked you. You did. I am sorry for that." The words surprised her. She had not planned to say them. Apologies did not come easily to Ithorian royalty. Elias turned to look at her, and his expression softened. "You laughed because you saw what I showed you. A quiet man with no impressive decorations. A representative of a young species with nothing to prove. You saw exactly what I wanted you to see. That does not excuse my behavior." "No," he agreed. "But it explains it. And I have learned that understanding is the first step toward forgiveness." They stood in silence for a while. 2 people from very different worlds, watching the universe turn above them. "What happens now?" Seraphine asked. "Now the real work begins. Humanity has a seat at the table, but a seat is just a piece of furniture. We need to earn trust. We need to build relationships. We need to prove that we can be partners, not just threats. That will take time, We are patient. He smiled again, and this time it reached his eyes. That is, perhaps, our greatest gift. We are very patient. She thought about that. About a species that had crawled out of caves and survived ice ages. About people who had fought wars against themselves and still found the strength to reach for the stars. About a man who had endured days of mockery without showing the slightest sign of anger. I think, she said slowly, that I would like to learn more about your people. Elias raised an eyebrow. An Ithorian princess wanting to learn about humans? That would have been unthinkable a week ago. A week ago, I was a fool. She met his gaze directly. I do not intend to remain one, he laughed, a warm sound that echoed across the balcony. It was the first time she had heard him laugh, and she found that she liked the sound. Then perhaps there is hope for us all, Your Highness. The next morning, the summit officially ended. The delegates returned to their ships and their homeworlds. Carrying with them the memory of what had happened in the Grand Hall, the story spread across the galaxy in days. The silent human who had brought empires to their knees with nothing but patience and truth, Elias. Vance boarded his small ship without ceremony. No crowds gathered to see him off. No trumpets played. He simply walked up the ramp, turned to give one last look at the Crystal Palace, and disappeared inside. Princess Seraphine watched from her balcony as the human vessel lifted off. It was still a modest ship, unremarkable among the great warships and luxury cruisers of the other delegations. But she would never look at it the same way again. She thought about the lessons she had learned in the past week, about the danger of assumptions, about the power of patience, about the surprising depths that could hide beneath a quiet surface. The ship rose through the golden clouds and vanished. Into the darkness between stars, somewhere out there, humanity was waiting, watching, learning in the galaxy. For the first time in its long history, was truly paying attention. In the years that followed, Princess Seraphine often thought about her conversation with Elias on that final night. She remembered his words about patience and understanding. She remembered his smile and the sound of his laugh. When she eventually became Empress, she made sure that humanity always had a voice in her court. She visited Earth and walked through their cities. She learned their history and their poetry and their strange, beautiful music. And sometimes, late at night, she stood on her balcony and looked up at the stars. She wondered if somewhere out there, a quiet man in a gray uniform was looking back. She liked to think he was. The galaxy had learned an ancient, human truth that day in the Grand Hall. It was not a truth about weapons or technology or power. It was simpler than that and more important. The loudest voice is rarely the most important one. The strongest fist does not always win. And those who are patient, who watch and wait and choose their moment carefully, can change the universe forever. Humanity had whispered, and the galaxy had trembled. It was only the beginning.